Hey folks, how are you doing today? Have you taken your vitamins? Have you had plenty of sleep, plenty of rest? Or are you feeling a little bit achy and down? Well, you know what you got to do? Get plenty of rest, drink a lot of liquids, and maybe not too much. And I'm not talking about beer or alcohol, I'm talking about water. So, today's guest is Douglas Mulhall. We go into a conversation about life, living, longevity, but also about the toxic metals that are out there. Things that are shortening our life every single second of the day, little by little, since the day we were born. Did you know that was happening? Because I had no idea. You know, I thought if I ate healthy, if I drank my water, if I exercised, if I went to sleep on time, did all that, that everything was going to be perfectly fine. Oh, and taking vitamins. But apparently, like I said, from the day that we're born, these toxic metals, these toxic things are around us everywhere, every moment of the day, and it's whittling away our life little by little. I'm not talking about big chunks, but little by little. So listen to this podcast and find out what it is in the atmosphere, in our environment, that's eating away at our longevity, and what we can do to live a little longer. All right? So let's get right into it. Oh, hey, before we do that, please remember to like, share, and follow and comment on this and all the podcasts. You can listen to this podcast everywhere podcasts are available and wherever you listen to your favorite podcast shows. Now, let's get into it. I want to ask one thing right off the bat because your latest book is Discovering the Nature of Longevity, Restoring the Heart and Body. Are we talking longevity beyond the natural lifespan, something like David Sinclair, where we're going to live longer, we're going to live to 150, or is this living up to the normal expectations of a lifespan, but in a healthy way?
Well, Chuck, what I always say is this affects how well and long we live. So it affects current quality of life in a very big way, starting right from birth. But as we'll talk about in the show here today, but I'll just give people a quick clue. These hidden stresses have been with us ever since Homo sapiens started walking the earth. We just realized it through our science very recently what the impacts are on our longevity. So this is why this is such a big story. And the reason I wrote the book is because I couldn't find anything like it that talked about the impact of these specific two sets of stresses on human longevity and on human well-being. And the books or the websites that do cover these usually talk about diet and things like that. But what we're talking about is reversing the damage from these hidden stresses. And that's why it's important for everybody who is watching and listening to this program, because it affects all of us in ways that most people are not told.
Yes, like you said, these hidden stresses, these heavy metals are around us. We eat we ingest it, we breathe it, we touch it. It's always there. So, how can we avoid it? Or how can we reverse this?
Well, let's talk about what heavy metals are, just for people, just give them a quick introduction, because everyone's heard of metals, everyone's heard of toxic metals, but what are heavy metals? It's very simple. A heavy metal is a scientific term for a metal that is 5 times more dense than water. It's a simple measurement. You don't really, need to know that to go on with your life, but that's the technical term that's used. But the important thing is this: heavy metals have no business in your body. They're not like trace elements of copper and zinc and other types of metals that your cells need trace amounts of to function. What we're talking about here is stuff that it has no, as I said, no business in your body. and that includes lead, cadmium, and arsenic to start with. Those have been the focus of the American Heart Association and many studies over 100 years. But it extends out to more than a dozen other metals, including gadolinium, which is a metal that is used in most consumer electronics products, chromium, which is used for chrome, and a whole bunch of other metals that have been found to be coming out of patients when they are treated for this. So that's what these heavy metals are all about. Now, getting to your question about what can we do about them, the good news is that that's a big, long answer. But the short answer is, first of all, there's stuff that you can do to stop it from getting into you. There's stuff that you can do to naturally help your body get rid of it. And there's stuff that you can do to take therapies that get rid of what your body can't get rid of. So on all three levels, we're looking at great stuff. The problem until now has been that most people simply aren't told about it. And the reason that they haven't been told about it is because the profound role of trace elements of these heavy metals. So we're talking about low levels of exposure here. We're not talking about metal poisoning that your healthcare provider would normally look for. We're talking about stuff that doesn't really show up that well in the standard blood tests. And for that reason, most people, and as patients, simply aren't told about it. The other problem being that, according to the American Heart Association, most healthcare providers are not trained in how to test for, diagnose, treat, or prevent these low levels of exposure. So what we have is a massive understatement of the effects and the damage that is done by these heavy metals. And that is exactly why I wrote the book, was to bring attention to this so that people could start to demand that attention be paid to it by their healthcare providers, and that people can also take a certain responsibility for their own health. I don't give medical advice because I'm not a physician. I came into this from the toxicology point of view, and that is to say that for the past decades, I have trained designers to design healthy products and buildings that actually protect people from these heavy metals. That's what I do. Our institute pioneered one of the main certifications that designers can use to determine if their products and buildings meet these requirements, and that certification is recognized by the US EPA. So I think it's because I came at it from the point of view of healthy products and keeping these things away from people rather than traditional medicine that I was actually able to see things that other people didn't. So that is why most healthcare providers, are not familiar with this, and I just happen to be lucky enough to have come at it from that direction. Now, the very first thing, the easiest thing that anybody can do, and I want to emphasize especially parents for their kids, because kids are most affected by this, for sure, and it doesn't show up until later life, is to improve the air quality in your home, your car, and your office, period. And the way that you can do that, you can do it in several ways. The first thing is get a better air filter for your air conditioning unit or your furnace unit or your car, so that they capture these tiny air particles, air pollution particles, that end up everywhere in our environment, but especially in indoor air where they are concentrated. Now, this is important because these air pollution particles contain heavy metals, and those metals lodge in your tissue when you breathe them in. So as much as possible, you want to prevent from breathing them. And keep in mind that we breathe millions of particles every time we take a breath. So, there's a lot of this stuff, and you want to make sure that you want to minimize that bad stuff from getting into you. So your local Home Depot store or your air conditioning supply dealer will have these filters. You need to ask for them, and believe me, it's a small price to pay. You can do the same thing with your water filters. So you can attach a heavy metal water filter to your drinking water tap. And this is far better than drinking bottled water from a plastic bottle, because plastic has a nasty habit of leaching heavy metals into soft drinks and water when it gets heated up. So drinking water or soft drinks from plastic bottles is definitely not a solution to this, just to be absolutely clear on that. So get the right kind of water filter that is certified for this. And it is important to look at the certifications. You can look in Consumer Reports or the US EPA site to see the certifications for both the water filters and the air filters. So I'll stop there. We haven't talked yet about how you can get this stuff out of you, but those are a few of the things that you can do. And by the way, you can also do a really simple thing. Take your shoes off when you get into the house. Your shoes are carrying all kinds of dust around that gets up in the air. And in schools, for example, that's why kids have asthma attacks when 25 or 35 kids suddenly get up and leave the classroom or come in after recess, because they're stirring up all this dust that comes in with their clothes and their shoes. And so this is a big issue in schools, and that's why they especially need these types of filtration systems. So take the shoes off when you come into the house, and you'll be doing you and your kids a big favor.
I do have several questions and comments on this now, especially with the one about the filter. Like you said, very, very easy to remedy. Go out in store and get a good filter. Don't buy the cheap one. Get the better one that takes out 99.99% of the contaminants in the air. My question: a lot of people spend a lot of time in cars, and folks don't know that many cars do have air filter in the car. Now, you do have that button on your dash that shows where it recirculates the air or that it brings in fresh air. Is it better to recirculate that filtered air? That's question number one. I'll let you answer that one.
Well, the most important thing is that you have a good filter, because regardless of whether it's fresh or recirculated, it's going through that filter. You know, if you're in the car and you're smoking, well, first of all, don't smoke, because smoke is full of heavy metals. Don't smoke in your car, and don't expose other people to that. I mean, I know that's a no-brainer. People who are still smoking, okay, they're still smoking. Just don't go near them. So that's a really important thing. So yes, the quality of the filter is really important, and here's why. Most people are unaware that the stuff that comes off of tires on the road, and a lot of stuff comes off, like every tire loses 10 to 20% of its weight and volume by the time it's reached the end of its useful life. So that stuff is going into your lungs. And that stuff has nasty heavy metals in it. So the particulates that come off these tires are a major cause of particulate air pollution, and they are a major cause of microplastics pollution in the ocean. Up to 40% of all microplastics in the ocean have been attributed to car tires. And by the way, those pieces of plastic aren't pure plastic. They also contain the metals that stabilize the plastic. So that is a big problem. And so the key to that is to make sure that your car's filtration system is working. I guess offhand, I would say if you're in a really smoky area, like a wildfire area or something like that, yes, turn your air conditioner definitely on to recirculate the air. So if you're in a heavy polluted area, that is definitely a smart thing to do.
Okay. Another, whether it be a question or comment, I don't know how this comes out, but like I said, a lot of stuff, it seems like it's the heavy metals are attached to us through our pores and other surfaces, so it makes it hard to detect for a doctor or nurse or healthcare provider to really look at. So my comment or question on that is, we hear about the far red infrared saunas, and you hear the benefits of that. Now, to sweat things out, will that help get rid of some of these heavy metal particles that may have attached to us and are seeping into our bodies?
Um, Usually, heavy metals don't get in through your skin pores unless you are putting stuff on you that has heavy metals in it, and some cosmetics still do. So it's mainly through breathing them in and ingesting them through water and for food. And I'll just give you one really disturbing example, which is why this is so important for parents, is that Consumer Reports has conducted 2 studies over 5 years showing that there are high levels of heavy metals in popular baby foods, if you can believe it. So we're feeding popular baby foods that have high levels of heavy metals to our kids. And this is a real problem. A congressional committee also identified the same problem in a separate study. And just recently, in fact, just about 2 weeks ago, the government of California signed into law a requirement that food companies test monthly baby food products for heavy metals and report it publicly. And this is a sea change. It's the first time in North America that this has been put into effect, and it's been a long time coming. But that's a beautiful example of how this stuff gets into you, starting from almost the day that you're born. And so now, in terms of sweating stuff out, I'll just explain for a moment how the body normally gets rid of heavy metals, which are in your tissue, normally not in your blood, okay? So the way that your body gets rid of them, it has developed certain enzymes that actually it uses to grab or chelate. This word chelate means to grab with a claw. That's the Greek translation of it. And it chemically grabs the metals, and then you pee them out. So that's how your body actually gets rid of these heavy metals. And there are certain foods that you can eat that can help those enzymes to do that, because they are natural chelators. And there are certain therapies that you can take that have been proven in clinical studies to remove large amounts of these heavy metals from tissue. So sweating it out, not really. The main avenue is to have it, go through the kidneys, and you pee it out once it has been chemically removed. Just keep in mind that when this stuff lodges in your tissue, it's really tough to get rid of because it's stuck there. And people might wonder what this stuff does to you. It does 3 very nasty things. The first thing is it disrupts your DNA, so it creates mutations that can lead to cancer. The second thing is it disrupts your neurons, the signals in your brain. It's just like taking a wire and putting it across 2 live wires. What happens when that happens? You get a short circuit. It's exactly the same thing that's going on. These are metals. So when they attach to your neurons, guess what's happening? You're getting a short circuit in your neuron. And a recent study in The Lancet has found that this is responsible for worldwide reduction of IQ in children, for example. And the third one is it causes oxidative stress, which leads to chronic inflammation. That is the first hallmark of causing hypertension, heart disease, and a whole bunch of other inflammatory diseases. So on 3 counts, this is really bad news, this stuff. And that's why you want to take all precautions to stop it from getting into you and to getting it out of you once it does.
That kind of explains to me why over the past, we'll say 15, maybe 20 years-ish, that there's been an increase in autism, in the autism spectrum. I don't know if the spectrum is just getting wider, but there's been more autistic children, or later in the years we find out that we are autistic ourselves. The other thing too is because it's in the blood, or it attaches itself, and it's very difficult to see or test that it's in the bloodstream. How do we as individuals gauge how much we've taken in? Because like you said, the heavy metals is an accumulation of a lifetime, which shortens your lifespan. But how do we know how much we've taken in? It's like every day I breathe, am I taking off 1/10 of a second of my life?
So here's the story. The way to test for this was discovered through the therapy. And the therapy is known as chelation therapy. Now, there's a lot of myths out there about chelation therapy that were dispelled in a $35 million National Institutes of Health funded clinical trial between 2008 and 2015, which proved that chelation therapy is safe and it was effective at reducing the causes of death, all causes of death in diabetic heart patients by 41%. So anyone who tells you that chelation is dangerous and doesn't work is not up on the science that is now fairly well established. What happened after that was there is a particularly nasty kind of heart disease known as peripheral artery disease. Some people might have read about it recently in a New York Times article about unnecessary surgeries for peripheral artery disease. It was a front page story about a month and a half ago. So this peripheral artery disease blocks your arteries and your limbs get lesions on them, and then your toes go black, and they either have to replace the artery, which happens in 1.5 million operations a year across the United States, or they have to cut your foot off, which happens to 200,000 people a year across North America. So the cardiologist who had performed the NIH clinical trial decided, also because 25% of amputees die in the first year, that was not a great result of surgery. And they decided to try this chelation therapy on these diabetic PAD patients. And the results were astonishing. It was a very small cohort, a very small group, and that's being followed up by a clinical trial now. But in this small group, the people who completed the study, which were 70% of the people completed the study, none of them had amputations. They were all scheduled for amputation. None of them had amputations. They all got better. The lesions on their legs healed, and their toes, which had been black with some with gangrene, were pink, and they were walking around on them instead of hobbling or being in a wheelchair. Remarkable. And this was published in 4 peer-reviewed publications in 2017. In 2017. Now, how does this relate to heavy metals? Because as they measured the heavy metals coming out in patients' urine when they treated them with this infusion, and what they found was lead more than 3,000% above the baseline that was taken in the blood tests. Can you imagine? 3,000% above. Same thing with similar results with a lot of metals: arsenic, cadmium, chromium, gadolinium. And guess what? As the amounts of metals coming out of those patients declined because they were being taken out of the body, the patients got better. And so this was the proof in the pudding. Well, out of that therapy actually came the test that had been used even before the therapy, but the therapy really proved the use of it. And that's called a challenge test, where you take a very brief infusion of that same therapy, which consists of a chelator, which I described earlier, that grabs the metals, and high doses of multivitamins and minerals that are synergistic with that process and help to repair the arterial system. So that's a very short test. It takes about an hour, and then you go and have a pee, and they measure the heavy metals in your pee. And that's how they find this. A standard blood test will not show it. I had this happen where the standard blood tests for me showed that I was in the safe range. But when those same tests were done on patients who were also in the safe range, whoa, all these heavy metals came out of them. So the blood tests will not show you the result. You have to demand this. And most standard healthcare providers, according to the American Health Association, are not familiar with these methods. And so you need to talk to an integrative cardiologist or a naturopathic doctor or a nurse practitioner who is familiar with this and familiar with the national standards of a national association that are used to administering these tests and these therapies. So that answers your question about how you can test for it. And by the way, there is not just the infusion that comes in through a needle. There's also a series of oral products out there you can use, oral chelation. I've used one of them. It's called Nanobac TX. I have no financial interest in the company, and they don't pay me to promote it, but I've used it, and my physician reported good results with it without getting into the details because I know we're running out of time. So there you go. People who can't go to the doctor's office once a week for an infusion can take an oral Nanobac TX, and the studies suggest that the results are similar. So that's how you test for this stuff.
One comment, one question. The comment would be that, like you said, many practitioners, doctors, they don't know about this, so they don't know how to go about doing the test. The other thing about this is it's not a standard test, so don't be afraid to ask for it. I know that some doctors or whoever it might be will tell you that, no, you don't need it, or they may question you. Why do you want it? Just go ahead and tell them, because I want it. I've been through that before where I've asked for certain things. They said, well, you don't need that. And they questioned me. I said, I want to establish a baseline for myself. So they did.
Correct.
My question would be,
the patient needs to ask for it.
Yes. So my question would be, does exercise help any of this with the hidden stresses? Does it help protect yourself against any of the adverse effects of breathing, all this bad stuff?
Yeah. Chuck, what I say in the book is all the standard stuff that you hear from holistic physicians about exercise, the right kind of diet, especially a plant-based diet, because animal-based diet has high levels of heavy metals in it normally, because these animals uptake them before you do. So before it gets to you, these are bioconcentrated. So a healthy diet, filtration, as I mentioned before. But so all of these standard things that a lot of other books talk about are very important. And the reason that exercise helps is because it keeps your body in shape so that it can produce these enzymes that actually help to remove these metals from your body. So I can't emphasize enough. But my book goes sort of beyond that and talks about this glass ceiling on longevity. It's a contradiction that more people are living longer, but we still haven't broken through the 120-year ceiling of longevity. So yes, people are living longer, but that ceiling is still there. We're still bumping up against it all the time. And by the way, average longevity in the United States is dropping now. So people who think that it's gradually increasing, not the case anymore in the U.S. because of this mess that we have with our healthcare system, which is a sick care system, and our diet and all kinds of other stresses that people are facing. So yes, always get your exercise. I mean, it just really helps for sure.
Yeah, I would imagine that includes sleep. Like I said, all the standard things that you hear to do to help yourself live longer and healthier. Once again, your book is called Discovering the Nature of Longevity, and the subtitle of that is Restoring the Heart and Body. Douglas Mulhall, this has been fantastic. I hope that you can find some time, and I definitely will make the time for you to come back again and talk a little bit more about this. It's very interesting because, again, we are discovering more people with autism. There are more people that have diabetes. We hear a lot of people say, and we see a lot of commercials for medication for allergies, but it seems like a lot of this may not be allergy. It could be these heavy metals, and there are therapies and ways that we could do to help. I don't want to say fix, but at least reverse the effects, or help begin reversing the effects.
Chuck, you're exactly right. And just to give you a little teaser for another episode that we can do sometime, here we have, I hope you can see that, a picture of the elastic fiber in your arteries. And on this side here, you see the nice, smooth, elastic fiber in a child. And on this side here is the nasty, messy junk that happens in a 90-year-old. This is being caused by hidden stresses such as heavy metals that degrade this elastic fiber that drives every breath you take and every step you make, and also lets all of your organs and arteries and skin stay flexible. So we need to get back to that and talk about the elastic fiber, because most people think it's collagen that makes you flexible. That is not true. It is the elastic fiber, and it's the topic of a whole other episode.
Again, thank you very much for your time, and this has really been insightful.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you for having me and bringing this valuable information.